The salt-laced wind whipped my hair across my face as the small plane lurched violently. My heart slammed against my ribs, panic clawing at my throat as the aircraft shuddered again, its wings tilting at a precarious angle. Below us, the Pacific Ocean stretched out like an endless abyss, a menacing mirror reflecting the storm-churned sky. Mia screamed, her voice high-pitched and terrified. "Claire, help!" Her wide, tear-filled eyes locked onto mine as she struggled against the seatbelt, pinning her in place. The plane jolted again, a deafening crack echoing through the cabin. My parents, their faces pale and drawn, scrambled toward Mia, their fear mirrored in each other's eyes. "We have to get out," Dad yelled, his voice thick with urgency. "The plane is going down." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I turned, trying to move, but a twisted piece of metal had trapped my leg. I thrashed, desperate, my hands slick with sweat and blood. The world tilted, then spun, and suddenly, everything plunged into chaos, a deafening roar, a blinding flash. Then, darkness awoke to the rhythmic crash of waves, the scent of salt and dampness filling my nostrils. My eyelids felt heavy, my body sore, as if I had been trampled by a herd of elephants. I forced my eyes open, my vision swimming before settling on the vast ocean surrounding me. A life raft. I gasped, pushing myself upright. Pieces of the plane floated in the distance, bits of luggage bobbing like forgotten memories. But there was no sign of my parents, no sign of Mia. "Mom? Dad?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the endless sea. "Mia?" Nothing. A sob rose in my throat, but I choked it down. Not now, not yet. I had survived. That meant something. It had to. Days bled into weeks. Hunger gnawed at me. Dehydration turned my throat into sandpaper, and the relentless sun blistered my skin. I found an island, a jagged, unforgiving mass of volcanic rock, and crawled onto its shore, collapsing onto the warm sand. I scavenged, rationed, learned. I made fishing spears from sharpened sticks, drank rainwater collected in hollowed-out shells, and fashioned a shelter from driftwood and palm fronds. Loneliness became my fiercest enemy, whispering doubts in my ear and threatening to swallow me whole. But I fought back. I found solace in the rhythm of the waves, the cries of seabirds, the fiery hues of sunset painting the sky. 15 days passed in a haze of hunger and desperation. My body grew weak. My mind slipped into delirium as dehydration gnawed at me. The sun was merciless, scorching my skin by day, while the nights were cold and unforgiving. I spoke to the wind, to the sea, to the ghosts of my past. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, and sometimes I swore I heard my mother's voice calling my name. But these 15 days, I learned the skills essential for survival. I mastered the art of making fire using friction, learned to identify edible plants and fruits, and crafted tools from sharp rocks and driftwood. I discovered how to set traps for small creatures, fashioned a fishing spear from a sturdy branch, and built a water collection system using large leaves and carved-out stones to catch morning dew and rain. Each day tested my limits, but with every hardship I adapted, becoming stronger, more resilient, and attuned to the unforgiving rhythms of nature. Then, on the 15th day, everything changed. I stumbled upon a hidden cave, half dazed and on the brink of collapse. Pushing past the curtain of vines, my breath hitched as the dim light revealed something impossible. Glittering diamonds embedded in the rocky walls, shimmering like stars in the darkness. My heart pounded, disbelief warring with a sudden surge of hope. This discovery would change everything. It would turn my world upside down, a cave, hidden behind a curtain of vines. Inside, the walls glowed with something mesmerizing. Diamonds, an impossible fortune, nestled among the rocks, shimmering under the weak shafts of light filtering through the entrance. Hope sparked inside me, a fragile flame. Over the years, I collected the diamonds, hiding them carefully. The island that once felt like my tomb had given me a second chance, and I was going to take it. After a grueling year of solitude, salvation finally arrived in the form of a fishing vessel. I had almost lost hope when I spotted the distant silhouette of a ship against the horizon. Summoning the last vestiges of my strength, I signaled desperately, waving a tattered piece of cloth and screaming until my throat was raw. The fishermen hauled me aboard, their faces etched with shock at my skeletal frame and sun-scorched skin. They fed me, gave me water, and wrapped me in blankets, their kindness overwhelming after so long alone. My battle, however, was far from over. I spent 6 agonizing months in the hospital, my body weak, my mind plagued by nightmares of the island. Each meal was a challenge, my stomach rejecting what it had long been deprived of. Sleep came in fits, haunted by the crash, the isolation, the endless gnawing hunger. But I fought through it, reclaiming my strength day by day. Once I was strong enough, I sought answers. My heart pounded as I uncovered the bitter truth. My family had abandoned me. When the rescue team arrived, Mia had cried, pleaded, and demanded to be taken first. My parents, desperate and overwhelmed, had caved to her selfish urgency, never once looking back to ensure I had made it. They had left me to die while they returned to their comfortable lives, mourning me as a tragic loss, one they never truly attempted to prevent. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had suffered on the island. But I wasn't the girl they had abandoned anymore. I had survived, and I would make them remember that. Years later, I stood in the heart of civilization, a world away from the island. But I was not the same girl who had boarded that doomed plane. I had survived, I had fought, and I had won. The diamonds paved my way, transforming me into a formidable force. After I regained my strength and ensured my place in civilization, I made the arduous journey back to the island. The moment my feet touched the familiar shore, memories of my struggles flooded my mind. The scorching sun, the endless hunger, the lonely nights. But this time, I was not a desperate survivor. I was a woman on a mission. Navigating the treacherous terrain, I pushed past overgrown paths and jagged rocks until I reached the hidden cave. My heart pounded as I unearthed the carefully concealed pouch, its weight heavy with promise. The diamonds, once a symbol of my isolation, were now the key to my rebirth. With one last look at the island that had shaped me, I turned and walked away, ready to claim the life that was rightfully mine. I built a business empire from the ground up, channeling my instincts and relentless determination into a powerhouse of success. I ventured into the luxury industry, establishing a conglomerate specializing in high-end jewelry and rare gemstones, leveraging my island-found diamonds as the foundation of my brand. Through strategic investments, I expanded into fashion, elite real estate, and global trade, making calculated acquisitions that positioned my company at the forefront of the industry. I secured exclusive deals with some of the world's most influential designers and investors, ensuring my business remained untouchable. News of my meteoric rise spread, whispered in the halls of high society, turning me into a legend, one that Mia could no longer ignore. Mia, now a pampered socialite, dismissed the rumors with a scoff. "Claire, please, she's dead, probably, eaten by sharks or something." But behind her smug exterior, a cold fear twisted in her gut. What if Claire was alive? What if she had returned? The very thought sent a shiver down her spine. Mia had spent years basking in the limelight, unchallenged, adored, free from the shadow of her sister. If Claire was back, she knew, deep down, her reign was at risk. Again, she was wrong. After hearing the news of my survival, My so-called parents reached out and showed up at my company, their faces painted with exaggerated sorrow. At first, they draped themselves in grief, lamenting how they had been forced to leave me behind, how they had suffered all these years believing I was gone. But their act was hollow, their words carefully chosen weapons of manipulation. When they saw that their tearful performance had no effect on me, they quickly changed tactics. Their demeanor shifted, their expressions smoothing into something more calculated. "How about we have a meal together as a family for now?" my father suggested, his voice too casual, too rehearsed. "We can discuss other things later." Other things. The words rang in my ears, setting off alarm bells. What exactly did they want from me? Why now, after all these years? Were they hoping to exploit the wealth and power I had built? I wanted to know their true intentions, to see just how far they would go. So, with a neutral expression masking the storm inside me, I agreed to their invitation. In the evening, I arrived at the luxurious hotel where they had booked a private dining room for dinner. I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking against the pavement, the soft fabric of my custom-made designer evening gown flowing around me. To the world, my appearance was effortless, exuding wealth and power, an image meticulously crafted over the years. As I entered the room, my parents and Mia were already seated, their conversation halting the moment they saw me. My mother gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief before she hurried toward me, grasping my hands as if to confirm I was real. "Claire, my dear, come, sit," she urged, her grip tight, her voice laced with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Guilt, perhaps, or something more sinister. Mia, however, was frozen. Her face was ghostly pale, as though she had seen an apparition of the sister she had long buried in her mind. Her lips parted slightly, her hands tightening around the silverware, knuckles turning white. But within seconds, the horror on her face flickered into something else. Envy. Her gaze raked over my gown, my jewelry, the effortless confidence I carried, and I saw it. The silent resentment burning behind her carefully composed expression. I met her stare with a calm, unreadable gaze, offering the faintest smirk. Let her wonder. Let her fear. Because tonight was only the beginning. As we started dinner, my father cleared his throat, his gaze heavy with unspoken expectation. "So, Claire, by now you have already known the situation of our company." I lifted my glass, taking a slow sip, using the moment to steady the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I had known about their company's situation. The family business, once a pillar of success, was now on the verge of collapse, bleeding resources due to Mia's reckless extravagance and appalling mismanagement. I had read the reports, seen the debts piling up, and watched from the sidelines as my father desperately tried to keep the sinking ship afloat. He hesitated before continuing. "So, can you help your father and sister?" Before he could finish, I set my glass down with a soft clink, cutting through his carefully crafted plea. "So, what do you want from me, father?" My voice was even, but the undercurrent of steel was unmistakable. Money? Management help? My connections? Mia flinched, gripping her silverware as if my words had physically struck her. My mother let out a quiet sigh, but my father's expression remained unreadable. But I knew. This wasn't about family or reconciliation. This was about survival. Their survival. And I was about to make them understand that I was no longer the girl they had abandoned, because I was going to take back what was mine. Mia had been eerily silent, her lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. But suddenly she snapped, her voice sharp with indignation. "Sister, how can you speak to father in that tone?" Her eyes flashed with something, anger, disbelief, or perhaps a desperate need to reassert control. I met her gaze steadily, my voice, measured but firm. "Mia, I haven't said anything that could possibly offend father. Father, who had been watching the exchange with calculating patience, chuckled lightly. Yes, Mia, your father is not offended at all. He turned his attention back to me, his expression shifting from forced geniality to thinly veiled expectation. I want to say, can you at least give us 100 million to rebuild our business? A tense silence filled the room, thick as a storm cloud. My mother, who had been watching carefully, chose that moment to interject, her voice laced with an almost practiced sorrow. We have raised you for so long, Claire. Doesn't family mean anything to you? I took a slow breath, suppressing the bitter laugh that threatened to escape. The audacity, the sheer shamelessness of their demand. They had abandoned me, left me to die. And now, they expected me to save them? I said with a firm tone. I will think about it. My father's face lit up with happiness, his eyes brimming with expectation. He probably thought I was considering his words seriously. But I wasn't. I had already made up my mind. I forced a small smile, just enough to keep him unaware of my turmoil, and continued eating. It should have been comforting. But tonight, every bite felt like a burden. After finishing dinner, I left no room for further conversation. I stood up, excused myself with a polite nod, and walked out. I could feel my so-called parents' eyes on my back, watching me closely. If only they knew what was going through my mind. As I reached my mansion, the familiar silence welcomed me. I went straight to my room, shutting the door behind me. Taking a deep breath, I headed to the bathroom, washing away the tension that clung to my skin like a second layer. The cold water did little to calm my racing thoughts. Once I was freshened up, I changed into comfortable clothes and sat at my desk. I pulled open the drawer, my fingers shaking slightly as they brushed against the old file. The papers inside held my past, my truth, one that had been kept from me for years. My so-called parents were not my real parents. They were my biological father's driver. The people I had trusted, the ones who had raised me, were nothing but opportunists. A fire. That's what changed everything. I had been 3 years old when my home was engulfed in flames. No one knew how it happened. But I knew now. Some time ago, an old family servant, one who had vanished after the incident, came to me, his face etched with guilt and fear. He told me the truth. My father had a quarrel with the family driver. The driver, as he called him, a man whose name I had never heard before. That man had set the fire. But he hadn't just wanted destruction. He wanted leverage. He took me, kidnapped me, so that even if my family survived, he could use me to blackmail them. But no one survived. My real parents, my real family perished in that fire. And after that, the man who took me claimed to be my distant relative and adopted me. All the child support meant for me, it went straight into his pockets. And as if that wasn't enough, after I turned 18, they planned something even more sinister. The plane incident. A tragedy meant to look like an accident. But it wasn't. It was just another move in their game, a way to get rid of me and claim my inheritance. My hands curled into fists, nails digging into my palms. The people I had called family had never been my family. They had stolen my life, my identity. And now, they further wanted to use me. But they had made one mistake. They thought I was still that helpless child. They had no idea what I had become. I quietly acquired shares, my influence growing in the shadows. When the time was right, I made my move. I knew her father prided himself on being a sharp businessman, but I also knew his weaknesses, his need to appear in control, and his desire for greater liquidity. Carefully, I planted the idea that holding onto his shares was limiting his ability to expand into new ventures. Through intermediaries, I made sure he believed that releasing a portion into the market was a smart, calculated move of his own making. The moment those shares were available, I was ready. Using proxies and discrete transactions, I secured them before anyone else could react. By the time he realized what had happened, the damage was already done. The power he once held had slipped through his fingers, straight into mine. Soon, a board meeting held. The boardroom was silent as I stepped inside, the sound of my heels clicking against the marble floor. Mia's eyes widened, her face draining of color. "You," she stammered, her voice a strangled whisper. "No, this isn't possible." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Hello, Mia. Miss me?" She looked around, seeking an ally but found none. I placed a thick file on the table, opening it to reveal damning evidence of mismanagement, embezzlement, sheer incompetence. The board members, once skeptical, now nodded, their expressions grave. "You ruined this company," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel. "And now it's time to fix it. Without you," Mia sputtered, her hands trembling. "You can't do this. This is my company." "No," I said, tilting my head. "It's mine now." The vote was swift, unanimous. Mia was out. As she stormed out of the room, humiliated and furious, I allowed myself a small smile. I had not only survived, I had triumphed. The girl they had left for dead had risen from the ashes, stronger, sharper, unstoppable. A phoenix reborn. I step up to the podium, my hands trembling with a mix of anger, fear, and the overwhelming weight of the truth I've carried for so long. The world watches, and my heart pounds in my chest. But I know this is the moment when everything changes. Taking a deep breath, I begin, my voice calm but resolute. For years, I've been living in a lie, one that was carefully constructed by people I thought were family. People who took me in under the pretenses of kindness, telling me they were parents, but they were never that. They were strangers, captors. They took me as a hostage, keeping me from the truth of who I really was, from the truth of who my biological parents were. They never let me know them, never allowed me the chance to remember the love and warmth they gave me, all because they wanted me to forget. I pause, the weight of it all almost suffocating, but I push forward. And that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that they were involved in the murder of my real parents. The people who I thought were my family had blood on their hands. They wanted me gone. They wanted me out of the way. And they thought they could erase the truth. Erase me by keeping me in the shadows of their lies. But the truth can never stay buried forever. My breath hitches, the anger bubbling up. But I refuse to let it break me. They kept me prisoner, isolated from the world, manipulating me into believing their twisted narrative. They tried to make me think I owed them something. But they weren't saving me. They were controlling me. They wanted me weak, unsure of myself, and they succeeded. They succeeded in making me doubt my worth, in making me believe I was nothing without them. I reach into my bag and pull out the evidence. The photographs, the recordings, the documents. They are the proof that I fought so hard to uncover. I place them on the table in front of me, my hands shaking, but my resolve unbroken. Here is the proof, the truth that can no longer be hidden. These are the records, the testimonies, the moments they tried so desperately to cover up. And it doesn't end there. When they thought they had me cornered, when they thought they had everything under control, they tried to kill me too. I let that hang in the air for a moment, watching the media absorb every word, every piece of evidence. They wanted me dead. They thought that would be the end of it, that I would disappear, just like my parents did. But they were wrong. I'm standing here today, and I will make sure that the world knows exactly who they are. I will make sure that justice is served, and they will never get away with what they've done. I let the silence settle, the weight of the truth hanging, heavy in the room. This is no longer about me. It's about the truth, about my parents, and about everything they tried to take from me. But I won't let them win. Not anymore. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the silence that followed my statement. I barely registered it at first, too consumed by the weight of what had just happened, the truth finally coming to light. But then, as the door to the room swung open, the figure of a police officer stepped in, his uniform crisp, his face grim. Without a word, he approached my so-called father, the man who had pretended to care for me all these years. He didn't even look up as the officer, read him his rights. There was no shock on his face, no remorse in his eyes, just the cold, detached expression of someone who had long since accepted that he was above the law. But today, the law was coming for him. I watched as the officer cuffed him, his handcuffs clicking into place with a finality that sent a shiver through me. Every step they took as they escorted him out of the room felt like a weight being lifted off my chest. The man who had been my captor, the one who had kept me locked away in a web of lies, was finally going to face the consequences of his actions. The cop turned to my so-called mother next. She had been silent throughout, her face pale and drawn, as if the reality of everything was finally hitting her. But there was no sympathy in my heart for her. She had chosen to stand by him, to aid him in every terrible thing he did to me and my real family. She was no innocent bystander. As the officer arrested her, I felt an odd sense of closure. The woman who had claimed to be my mother, who had raised me under false pretenses, was going to pay for her role in this nightmare. And the worst part? She had never once shown a shred of real affection for me. She had only ever been his accomplice, complicit in every lie, every manipulation. But it wasn't just them. My so-called sister, the one who had always believed the world and its luxuries should revolve around her, stepped forward. I had always seen the entitlement in her eyes, the way she acted as if I didn't belong, as if I was just an obstacle, in her way. She had never cared for me, not truly. She had always been a product of the lies they told, and now she would face the consequences of her selfishness. When the verdict came, I wasn't prepared for the rush of emotions that hit me. My so-called father, sentenced to life imprisonment for his role in my parents' murder and everything that followed, would never be free again. The man who had stolen my childhood, who had tried to break me, would now be trapped behind bars, just as I had been all those years. My so-called mother, his accomplice, sentenced to 10 years, would live with the knowledge that she had betrayed not only me, but my real family as well. And my so-called sister, the one who had always thought everything was hers by birthright, sentenced to 3 years in prison. It wasn't enough for what she had done, but it was a start. It was justice, and I couldn't help but feel a cold satisfaction knowing that she would finally have to face the consequences of her greed and cruelty. I stood there, the weight of the verdict settling in. It was over. They were going to pay for everything they had done to me, to my family, to my life. And for the first time in so many years, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. Now, I could move on. There would be no more looking over my shoulder. No more wondering if I was still trapped in their lies. It was done. The truth had won, and I could finally take a step forward into a world where I didn't have to hide, where I didn't have to live in fear of what they might do next. As the door closed behind them, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long: freedom. If you like this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories like these only at StoryTimes.